Chapter 9. Of the virtue of prudence as practiced by the most holy Queen of Heaven. As the acts of the understanding go before the acts of the will, and direct them on the way, the virtues pertaining to the exercise of the understanding also precede those of the will. Although the proper sphere of the intellect is to recognize the truth and comprehend it, thereby perhaps causing a doubt whether it can be classed as a virtue, for virtue of its very nature consists in tending toward and practicing the good. Yet it is certain that there are also intellectual virtues, the practice of which is praiseworthy in proportion as they conform to reason and truth, for these are the proper good of the intellect. When therefore it proposes truth to the will and instructs the will to follow its guidance, then this act of the intellect is theologically good, when matters of faith are concerned, and morally good when, as for instance in the exercise of prudence, the operations of the appetites are regulated. On this account the virtue of prudence comes first as pertaining to the proper use of the understanding. It is, as it were, the root of the other cardinal and moral virtues, for these others are praiseworthy when accompanied by prudence, and faulty and reprehensible when devoid of it. The sovereign Queen Mary possessed this virtue of prudence in supreme excellence, and in proportion to the height of her other virtues already described, and yet to be described. On account of her wonderful prudence, the Church calls her the Virgin most prudent. As this virtue governs all the others, and as this whole history treats of the exercise of these virtues in the most holy Mary, all of what little I can say and manifest of this sea of prudence will be nothing else than a continual implied reference to her prudence, and all her works will show the splendor of this virtue. Therefore I will speak here more in general of the prudence of the Sovereign Queen, exhibiting the different parts and qualities of prudence as taught us by teachers and saints, in order that we may thereby obtain a better understanding of it in her regard. Of the three kinds of prudence called political, purgative, and that of a soul already purified or perfect, none was wanting in our Queen, and they were hers in the highest degree. For although all her faculties were most pure and perfect, or, in other words, had no need of being purified from any faultiness or opposition to virtue, yet they could be improved as regards the natural knowledge, and in as far as the progress from goodness and holiness to greatest goodness and holiness was concerned. This must be understood, of course, only of her own works, as far as they are compared with each other, and not in as far as they are brought into comparison with the works of others. For in comparison with the works of other saints, there was no great or small in this city of God, whose foundations are above the holy mountains. But in her own works, since they grew in charity and grace from the first moment of her conception, some of them, though in themselves most perfect and superior to all the works of the saints, were less perfect in comparison with other acts of a later period in her life. Political prudence in general is that which ponders and weighs all that is to be done and reduces it to the dictates of reason, eschewing all that is not just and good. The purgative or purifying prudence is that which disposes and selects all things in such a way as to rectify the heart by divine contemplation toward all celestial things. The prudence of the purified or perfect soul is that which directs and centers all the affections upon the highest good, as if no other object existed. All these kinds of prudence existed in most holy Mary, in order that she might distinguish and know without fail, direct and accomplish without remissness or tardiness, whatever is most perfect and excellent in the fulfillment of her works. Never did the judgment of this sovereign lady in the whole range of her activity dictate or attach itself to anything which was not the best and most proper. No one ever equaled her in disposing and directing all visible or worldly matters so as to make them useful for divine contemplation. Therefore, having perceived them so intimately and in so many different lights of knowledge, she was united in such a manner to the highest good by divine love that no preoccupation or hindrance ever prevented her from resting completely in the center of her love.